1956, one of the greatest whitetails of all time was taken by Edward Dooner. This is the story of a singularly amazing deer as told through the numerous newspaper and magazine articles that have been published since that time. Geauga Deer Rates Number 3 with Hank Andrews, The Cleveland Press, Tuesday, December 10th, 1957. Some real trophy-sized deer roam Ohio. We don't have the numbers that Pennsylvania has, but our deer usually are much bigger. Last year, for instance, Edward Dooner, 416 Avery Street, Bedford, got the 7th largest non-typical trophy ever taken in North America. It has a longer antler beam than any whitetail ever taken, according to the Boone and Crockett Club of New York. Dooner got his big buck in the region of the Cuyahoga River near Route 422. 56 Whitetail was a real catch. One of the finest whitetails of all time was taken in 1956 on what is Akron watershed property near Ladue Reservoir in Geauga County, according to research completed by Ed Dooner of Macedonia. I was amazed, Dooner said. I knew my father, Edward, had harvested an impressive deer, but I had no idea how impressive until I checked it against other non-typical deer in the Boone and Crockett records. The study showed that the deer's main beams were the largest among those in the record books, with the left beam measuring 32 3/8 inches and the right beam 31 5/8 inches. The deer, by the way, had 11 points and weighed more than 300 pounds on foot. According to the elder Dooner, the Amish in the area claimed the deer's antlers glowed in the moonlight. It was the most beautiful whitetail in the world, he said. The Cleveland Plain Dealer, Friday, December 14th, 1990. Racking points. Big buck was third largest, by Bob Migra, Plain Dealer reporter. Eddie Dooner captured a lifetime of memories in 1956. At a time when deer were scarce in Ohio, Dooner shot a trophy buck in Geauga County that is still one of the largest ever taken in the state. The buck, once displayed at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, sits in a glass case in the trophy room of Dooner's Walton Hills home that borders the Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area. Boone and Crockett official Jack Renault said Dooner's buck is the only one ever killed in Ohio with both main antler beams measuring more than 30 inches. The right beam measures 31 5/8 inches. On the final day of the deer season, Dooner said he was ready to call it a day when the cold rain turned to sleet. Around noon, he said he heard shots in the distance and from his tree stand saw the buck emerge from the brush out of range. My only hope was that the buck would turn towards me, said Dooner. Luck befell Dooner, and he soon downed the buck with one shot from his Sears 12-gauge pump shotgun. The Akron Beacon Journal, Friday, November 20th, 1992. Wonder deer still a sight. Non-typical whitetail, harvested 36 years ago, has record main beams. It has been 36 years now since Ed Dooner Sr., in a moment when seeing was barely believing, harvested what he and others have called the buck of 1,000 lifetimes on Ladue Reservoir property in Geauga County. It was, after all, the son, a certified public accountant, who affixed himself to his computers for 3 days to determine that the deer was, as he suspected, a very special animal indeed. A singular animal, really, this 11-point non-typical that scored 197 5/8. Of the 526 non-typical whitetails listed in Boone and Crockett records of North American big game, the deer ranked first in length of main beams, the left reaching 32.375 inches and the right 31.625 inches. Moreover, the inside spread, 25.25 inches, ranked 18th. Hunters have taken 75 million whitetail deer in this country over the years, and of those, only 750 qualified for the records books. Of those 750, His dad's deer ranks first in length of beam. It's truly remarkable, he said. The Cleveland Plain Dealer, November 12, 1999, by Darcy Egan. Big Buck Revisited. Eddie Dooner was chided for buying a deer hunting permit in 1956. Few deer roamed the Geauga County woods where he planned to hunt, but the Walton Hill sportsman wanted to give it a try. The buck he shot on the third and final day of the 1956 season was the stuff of dreams, a 320-pounder with antlers scoring 197 and 5/8 using the Boone and Crockett system. Dooner's buck was featured in the Plain Dealer almost a decade ago, but the story is being told again in the September issue of North American Whitetail magazine. The author is F. Daniel Somrak, a filmmaker and Dooner's nephew. Beams to Brag About in North American Whitetail by F. Daniel Somrak, September 1999. It's rare for even a Boone and Crockett non-typical to have main beams that stretch 30 inches. But this Ohio giant from yesteryear has a pair that beat that mark with room to spare. As a documentary filmmaker, I've traveled the world to interview some of the legendary record holders whose sporting achievements have stood the test of time. Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Reggie Jackson, Will Chamberlain, and Monica Seles are some of the legends with whom I've had the honor of working. So on my recent visit home to Ohio, I felt it my duty as a sports historian to interview another important record holder. The man's a deer hunter, and he happens to be my uncle, Ed Dooner. Scientists at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, where the mount once was displayed, estimated that the buck was 4 years old when harvested. Fur Fishing Game, King of the Hill, January 2002. A single shining moment can define a hunter's career. For Ed Dooner, that moment came 45 years ago on a cold Ohio morning when he downed a giant trophy buck that local farmers called the King of the Hill. Holding the J.C. Higgins 12-gauge, he downed the trophy buck. Ed smiled when I asked him to reflect back on that cold morning in 1956. With the temperature hovering around 10 degrees, my stamina and perseverance were being tested by the minute. Around 1 p.m., with a drizzle of snow and sleet falling, I considered calling it a day. Suddenly the wind and rain abated, and the sun poked through the clouds. Within minutes there was a dead calm all around me. A few minutes later I heard a loud gunshot pop off in the distance. I peered across the field and into the timber area where the shot had originated. Then, almost like a mirage, I saw the sunlight reflecting off the rack of a gigantic buck's antlers that had sprung from the underbrush and stood alongside the river. At that moment the large whitetail was out of range for me, but as luck would have it, it turned and began charging upriver in the direction of my stand. When the deer was within 30 yards, I aimed for the shoulder and slowly squeezed the trigger. The buck danced in a circle, then dropped. Shortly after the buck was mounted, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History borrowed it for a display in the 1957 Cleveland Sportsman Show. Due to the overwhelming response, they loaned the buck to the New York Museum of Natural History, where it represented all the white-tailed deer of the North American continent. It was special to see my buck displayed next to some of the all-time big game trophies.